here we are with our slabs for our soft slab construction, our cylinder, and I've let them firm up to a leather hard, basically leather hard. It's not going to crack on me. It's really important that this doesn't crack on you when you bend it. So if you let it get past a soft leather to leather hard, it's going to end up cracking. So I want to catch it in time. Here is my top and my bottom and my side. So when I attach these together, I'm going to slip and score on the rim of the top of this one, and that's going to attach to one of the sides here. So I'll slip and score this side as well. Before I do that, I want to double check that my slab is in fact the right size for my cylinder, which I did. I will do again. I kind of picked it up and bent it around and started lining it all up, and I checked to see if it met in an appropriate way, that it wasn't too long or too short, and it isn't. So I'm going to take it down, and I need to cut the ends of this at angles so that they come together nicely. So when I do this, I have to make sure that when they come together, they're going to overlap in the right way. I don't want to cut the angles so that they are cut where they won't come together. And I'm going to do this at a pretty extreme angle so that I can really get good overlap between the two. So I'm going to cut this, and I let the kind of the tip of my knife hit the board, and I'm going to cut it so that there's plenty of places for the clay to adhere. The problem with putting clay together is that if you don't have enough surface area, it doesn't want to adhere. So I've got an angle here, and the trick is to get it cut the right direction. So if this is cut like that direction, then I need to angle the other one under. So I need to cut it underneath, which is a little bit more problematic. So what I'm going to do instead, since I don't have to worry about not bending this, is flip it over and cut the other side so that it's easier for me to do that. And again, I'm letting the knife just drag across the board and cut that clay. If you're not confident in doing that, you could use the rasp that you have to rasp it down. So now I've got two sides that are angled, and I need to start slipping and scoring. So I'm going to slip and score the edge, not the outer edge, but the top, the edge of the top, because we need to get compression on this, and so pushing down can help us do that. And we need to double check something, because I may have forgotten an important step. So we want this to be 6 inches tall, right? And this is a 1/4 inch. Actually, let's see, how thick are they? This is a 1/4 inch, and this is a 1/4 inch. So that's a 1/2 inch. So I would need this to be about 5.5 inches tall, and I think it might be 6. Let's see. It is 5, and I planned ahead. This is 5 7/8. So you're going to say to yourself, wait, that's still an 1/8 too tall. But because the clay is softer, it's going to compress some. So we're going to lose some of our height. So giving it a little bit extra is fine. So I've scored the outside of there. I'm going to score a side of this. Get it nice and textured. And I also am going to score the sides because it's all going to sort of come together at once. And again, my clay is supple enough to bend without breaking, so I can pick it up like that and bend it. If you are doing this on a drywall board like I am, please be very careful not to just flood the board with water. It degrades the paper. You don't need a ton of water. You're just trying to get it a little bit shiny. And then we'll score again and get it nice and gummy. Okay, so probably the kind of awkward part of this is picking this whole slab up, and we're going to put it onto our round. And this takes a little bit of patience because I need to bend the whole thing around. And I'm going to get one side kind of on there, and I'm going to sort of wiggle it down, kind of applying pressure to get it to adhere. I'm going to sort of put my hands on either side and kind of holding the two sides, push down. Gotta bend this a little bit more. And I've got a nice area of overlap there that I'm gonna gently push together. Before I put that together, I kind of check it. I want to check that my top hasn't gotten a little bigger than it should, so I'm going to put my top on and just look at that. That looks pretty good. And I'm going to reach in and, putting my hand on the inside, start to compress that seam together. I don't want to thin out anything, which is why we did the bevel, so that we could do this without having too much thickness or thinning happening. We're pushing on the areas that are overlapped. And that, when that is adhered, I'm going to go ahead and kind of give this a little bit of a push. Now, slabs at this stage don't necessarily have to have their edges reinforced like we did for the hard slabs. However, if you feel like you haven't necessarily gotten a great seal, you definitely can reinforce them with a coil, which I will go ahead and do. So I rolled out a small coil here, kept it nice and soft, and I'm going to slip and score inside the bottom of this piece all the way around. It's important for adherence that you slip and score, otherwise it's just going to want to crack off. And use water. Same thing, do it again. Alright, and then with my coil, I like to, like you saw in the other video, I like to kind of like give it a little bit of a corner itself, give it a little bit of a, like a triangle look, so it fits into the corner that I've made a little bit better. And then I'm going to slip and score this coil. And I don't need to do like a ton of length of this, because as I push it in, it's gonna really expand as you kind of compress, much like with pinching and coiling, they kind of grow because you're compressing them. So I'm going to lower this in here. And compress that angle that I made into the corners. And then I'm going to remove the extra coil here and make sure that is all really in there, really work together, really compressed. I want to make sure I don't have any air pockets between the coil and the slab. That is super important when you're working these together. So I'm going to start with my finger, working them together, making sure it's adhered well, and I'm going to go in there with generally a rib that has like a 90-degree angle on it, and start to kind of work those, smooth those out, smooth them over, remove any excess clay that I have, and just have a nice smooth surface all the way through. We don't want any messy, jagged things in there. And you don't want their coil too thick, because you don't want to make a really thick spot where it could do weird things with shrinking or with cracking. So you can see I was kind of pushing on it. It moved it out a little bit, so I'm going to kind of push that back in. Can use my rib, which I know is 90 degrees, and work that end back in. Alright, so I know I've got some extra clay on this seam, but I'm not going to worry about that too much now, because I'm letting that set up. What I'm going to do now is attach my top. And I won't be able to reinforce the top with a coil, because it'll be sealed in there, but we should be able to get pretty good compression on this. So I'm going to line this up. Looks pretty good. Again, I've got a little bit of extra clay here, but I knew that that was the case because I need to surface that. And I'm going to slip and score this on. If when you're building this, the rim of this gets really off, you can go ahead and mark it with a ruler. Find the lowest point, which will hopefully be 6 inches. You don't want to get lower than 6 inches. I'm sorry, it'll be 6 inches when you put this on. Right now mine is about I've got about an eighth of room left. So I want to measure around, find the lowest point, mark it all the way around, and then we can use our rasp to cut away that that amount. And so we're going to slip and score. Now, if you were doing a slab piece that was not symmetrical, the side that you slipped and score would be really important. This is just a circle, so not so critical which side you use. I would just say just try to be clean about what you're doing and not score more than you need to. And water. And we'll score again. And I'm going to line all this up, knowing that I've got a little bit of extra clay at my seam, and I'm going to start to push down. And again, this is another time when if it's a little bit, if the bottom part is a little bit pushed out, that's okay. You can just push it in. But if it's too far in, it gets kind of hard to fix. So I've got it adhered primarily, and I'm going to run my finger compressing along that edge. I'm not pushing in the center because I don't want to collapse it, but I'm pushing along the edge to really adhere that. It's also compressing the slab a little bit, and I'm probably losing some height. So look at that. This is a 6-inch ruler, and I'm at 6 inches. So we measured well. I know we're going to have to do a little bit of cleanup, and we'll just clean up this extra slip that's happening here. We can also turn this over and compress the bottom if we'd like to, and we can use our 45 or 90-degree angle rib on the other side and work on straightening out those sides. Again, I know I have some extra clay at the seam. I'm not going to worry too much about that. We can push it a little bit. Alright, so at this point, I need to let this piece rest. I don't want it to set up anymore. I don't want it to progress through the stages, but I need to let these seams get really, really solid, because if I start working at it with the seams not fully set, it's just going to bust apart. So I really need to give it some time to rest. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to stop messing with it, spritz it with water, wrap it up tightly with plastic so it doesn't get any drier, and then when I come back to it, I'll be able to really clean this up. Welcome back. We have let our cylinder firm up to that hard leather, hard to cheese state that we described in the other video, and now I need to clean this up. It's kind of rough. You can still see all the seams. I did put a hole in the bottom. Doesn't need to be a big hole, just a pinhole when it got to like a soft leather hard, so that I didn't end up with cracked seams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my rasp. You might look like this, might have just kind of a smaller handle that goes over the top. And I'm going to remove any extra clay from the edges. This seam is thicker than the rest of it, so I'm going to take away some of that thickness. I want to be careful. I don't want to overdo it because I don't want to pull away too much clay where it isn't overlapped. So this one's I need to be careful about. When I make something like this, same thing with the cube you'll see, we don't need the edges to actually be 90 degrees. You want to round those out, bevel them, so that they're not going to chip on you. Because things that are actually 90 degrees tend to chip when they're made of ceramic, and also the glaze just really runs away from it. So we don't want that. So we are going to carve out those edges, and your eyes fix it. You won't be able to tell. So I'm going to start by removing some of this extra clay from top and bottom, and because it's at that cheese state, it should carve away really easily like you would grate cheese. And as I rib the form, that bevel that I made will become less extreme. Alright, so I've done the two ends, and I'm going to start to take away clay from the seam. But again, I don't want to go crazy with it at first. I need to be really careful and only take away from the areas I know that it's overlapped, and then kind of work back and forth after that. Because if I cut away too much, like if I cut away too much right here and it's too thin there, I've just got a hole. Okay, so put my rasp aside and get this stuff out of the way. And now I'm going to use different hard ribs and flat ribs to smooth this out. So I could start with my wooden rib. I want to make sure it's nice and clean. And I want to start to smooth these surfaces. Work that down. As I do this, I should start to work that bevel, and I can kind of find where things might need to be paddled a little bit or worked a little bit more. I can see that right here I've got a bulge, and so I'm gonna paddle that just a bit to get it back into its appropriate cylindrical form, and it went in nicely. Gonna look for things like that on this other side as I rib this. And I do have a little bit of that happening here. Just gonna paddle it in just a little bit. And you can see that as I rib this, that bevel is definitely pulling itself back. It's not like it's really obvious that it's beveled now. So again, I'm going to continue working on this with clean ribs. So have my smooth metal rib, and I want to start working on the surface. We're going for a hyper smooth surface where I can't see any of the seams on any of these pieces. So that might take a little bit, especially where you have the pieces that connect. There might be a bump out where those pieces come together, so you might end up needing to take away a bit more material with the rasp here, if you notice that. So if I notice I've got a differentiation in the seam, I might want to take away a little bit of clay and then go back and smooth again. And again, this is at that kind of hard leather, hard to cheese stage where I should be able to do a lot to it without it deforming. If I really wanted to, I could deform it, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm trying to smooth everything out. Get that surface really compressed and really smooth. So as I'm doing this, you can see in the areas that I've ribbed, they're starting to get a kind of a sheen to them. I'm going to keep doing that. And so I'm going to keep going around and around looking for spots that need to be smoothed out, that need to be adjusted. I'm going to keep working my different sides. So if I want to work the top of this some more to get it really, really smooth and clean. So you're going to notice now that I made that big bevel, and it's all but gone now. It's back to having a 90-degree angle, so it's kind of a back and forth process. At a certain point, you can just use your finger and round that back out so that you have something nice and smooth. Once you do the metal ribbing on all of the surface on this, you've gotten it really honed in. It's really straight sides, really symmetrical. You're gonna go back in with your soft rubber ribs. There's different hardnesses of these depending on what you need to do, and you're gonna rubber rib, again, clean rib, rubber rib your surfaces to start making that hyper smooth finish. So you can see there, you can kind of get a sheen to that surface. It's getting very smooth. This is that area that I ribbed more and compressed and took away some clay to make it so I can't see my seam at all. So that's what I'm going to do all the way around this form until I am happy with it. And then I'm going to start to let it set up more, getting past get to hard cheese and then to chocolate. And I'm going to go back in each time I look at it with my clean rubber rib and keep compressing and smoothing that surface, because that's how you get that ultra fine, ultra smooth surface. As it dries, you might notice the seams come back to the surface a little more, and if that happens, you have the opportunity to recompress them with your rib before it gets fired. So here is my cylinder. I'm going to keep working on it and keep smoothing it so I have that super hyper smooth finish on this cylinder.